Great. I want to welcome you all to today's webinar. My name is Nate Hausman. I am Inclusive Prosperity Capital's Solar for All Program Director. And this webinar is a Solar for All deep dive on Davis-Bacon and related acts, or DBRA, you may hear. It's a really important topic for the success of our Solar for All program. And just to give you a sense of that program, Inclusive Prosperity Capital, IPC, is leading the Community Power Coalition, which is scaling and replicating impactful solar models that deliver economic benefits and train an ever-growing cadre of solar developers across the country. And DBRA, Davis-Bacon, is a key compliance area for solar developers participating in our program. So we'll dive into what all this means. But before we do, I just want to let you know a few things. One is this webinar is being recorded. We will share the recording and the slide deck from it in a follow-up email. We'll also post it to our Solar for All FAQ page. Second, IPC policy does not allow for AI note takers or bots, so they'll be excused. All attendees are in listen-only mode. We are collecting questions, and we will set aside time at the end to answer as many of them as we can. So please type your questions into the Q&A console. And we encourage you to type in your questions as they arise and not wait till the very end, and that'll help your chances, help ensure that your question gets answered. But again, in the event that your question isn't answered during the course of this webinar, we'll collate and answer questions in an FAQ that we circulate after the webinar. And actually, on that note, on our Solar for All, on IPC Solar for All page, you'll find answers to questions from prior webinars we hosted about our Solar for All financial assistance program. You can also find you can find links to recordings from prior webinars and slide decks there too. Great. I want to just talk through some disclaimers before we get underway. One, this information is not to be construed as legal advice or as a substitute for conducting your own independent eligibility and compliance analysis. Solar for All applicants are responsible for doing their own program eligibility and compliance analysis. I also want to emphasize that Solar for All, the program, is evolving, and so should guidance change, we will follow that future guidance, and we will do our best to keep you apprised. And finally, that this program is supported by the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, and the content does not necessarily reflect the views or policies of the Environmental Protection Agency, of course. Okay, with that out of the way, let me introduce our speakers for today. Jeffrey Magone. Jeffrey is a senior manager for CohnReznick Advisory, who brings over 13 years of experience designing, managing, and implementing federal, state, and local grant and loan programs. Jeffrey has worked in county government as part of LIHTC Development Group, in private consulting for the last 7 years. He has worked with various HUD, EPA, and Treasury programs requiring compliance with Davis-Bacon. We're also fortunate to be joined by John Abe. John is the CEO and founder of Sunwealth Power, which co-develops and invests in impactful community-based solar and solar plus storage projects. Sunwealth has built and manages over 765 projects across 18 states and DC. John has almost 20 years of experience in the development, financing, construction, and operation of commercial scale solar projects. He previously worked at NextAmp and Massachusetts Renewable Energy Trust, now MassEC, DNV, and AmeriCorps. He received a BA from Cornell University. I also just want to let folks know that we're fortunate to have other members of IPC's team, as well as folks from Impact Consulting, to help answer questions during the Q&A. So you may see them chime in as well. And with that, let me turn it over to you, Jeffrey. Take it away.
Appreciate it, Nate. And if we could go on to the next slide and get into the table of contents, we can go ahead and provide a quick overview of what we hope to achieve today. So very briefly, what I'd like to do is go over the fundamentals of Davis-Bacon. This is intended to provide a base level of knowledge and understanding as to what Davis-Bacon is, the related acts, and how it applies to you. This webinar here is going to be focused more so on the developer contractor role within the kind of system and kind of ecosystem of Davis-Bacon and of compliance. We've provided previous training as it relates to the roles and responsibilities of the funding agency, of the grantees, recipients, and subrecipients being funded, a brief overview of the contractors, and as well as Department of Labor and their role and impact. But just want to manage the expectations and set the stage that we're really focusing on the contractor developer role within this training. And then finally, we'll end. We hope to leave about 20 minutes or so at the end for a Q&A session that myself, John, Robin, and a number of IPC staff will hopefully be able to help provide clarity and context. Next slide, Nate. So the fundamentals. What is Davis-Bacon Act? What are the Davis-Bacon related acts? And we'll talk about construction types, wages, workers, wage determinations, how you find those, how you may receive those, and so on and so forth. Next slide. So what is the Davis-Bacon Act and what are the Davis-Bacon related acts? So the Davis-Bacon Act itself really applies to the payment of locally prevailing wages and fringe benefits. So Davis-Bacon wages, Davis-Bacon payrolls, you may hear various terms relating to that. And the application of this is for laborers and mechanics performing various construction types of work at the site. One of the things in order to be in compliance is, tracking this on a weekly basis. You'll hear about us, speak about weekly certified payrolls, the importance of those and the importance of filling those out correctly in order to demonstrate compliance with the program. Additionally, there's more than 70 related acts that have various kind of implications, but at a high level, such things as the Contract Work Hours and Safety Standards Act, the Copeland Anti-Kickback Act. Each of those, they're fairly self-explanatory. They have small kind of impacts on the overall environment here, but just to give a high level on those, the Contract Work Hours talks about any time worked over 40 needs to be paid time and a half. The Copeland Anti-Kickback talks about it not being allowable for contractors to pay wages to the workers and then expect a return of those wages. So showing how those different types of activities are disallowed and not part of the program. And then finally, who enforces DBA, Davis-Bacon Acts, and Davis-Bacon related acts? Well, that's going to be the Department of Labor and the federal contracting entity, which in this case is the EPA. The EPA is pushing down all the requirements within the grant and contract agreements with the recipients of grant funds. And, by association, those entities receiving the funds are pushing those requirements down within the contracts, within the contract language, down to developers and contractors. So it will be very explicit in your contracts to perform construction work, what the requirements surrounding Davis-Bacon are going to be. Next slide, Nate. So Davis-Bacon wages and workers. Well, what is a wage? And when we talk about wages, how is that defined? What does that mean? How is the Department of Labor looking at that? So very simply, the wages are the basic hourly wage plus an hourly fringe rate. So any benefits that are provided. And the total of that is going to be the payment standard to the minimum payment standard to laborers and mechanics for that position. As we go through this training, we'll give an example as to what those wage determinations and decisions look like, how you can read through those, and what information is there provided for you. What is a prevailing wage? So the prevailing wage is the wage that DOL has determined that's paid to more than 50% of the workers in a certain classification. Now, how do they arrive at this? So the Department of Labor sends out surveys to local market jurisdictions, to trades, to identify what the local prevailing wage is. Those surveys are responded to, that information is aggregated, and that's how the Department of Labor, analyzes, synthesizes, and then posts that information, for accessibility. We're going to get into it, but that information is ultimately posted to the System of Award Management website, or sam.gov. And like I said, we'll get into that very shortly here. Who must be paid that prevailing wage? The language within the Davis-Bacon rules applies to laborers and mechanics. So that's really who we are focused on here, laborers and mechanics working on those projects, as opposed to the more managerial type roles, the more those soft skill type roles. Next slide, please. So the fundamentals of Davis-Bacon and the wage rates, there's actually 4 wage kind of categories or buckets, you could say, that the wage determinations and decisions fall into. That being residential, building, highway, and heavy construction. Now, as you can see here on the slide, it's not anticipated that either highway or heavy construction is going to apply within this program. That's not to say it won't, but highly unlikely. I think the one that we'll probably end up focusing on is building. And there may be, depending on the type of project that you're working on, it could be a residential, but let's focus on building for this point in time. Building is for residential developments that are 5 or more stories. Machinery, buildings that house supplies, equipment, utilities, and the incidental work, site work related to that. Residential, as you can see here, is, single family homes, apartments, townhouses, no more than 4. So that is more restrictive, but building is going to be more of a catch-all. Next slide. So as I mentioned before, the wage decisions, the Department of Labor aggregates all this information and posts it to sam.gov, or System of Award Management is what that stands for. And that's going to be applicable to the various local geography that you're going to be working in. Fringe rates, we talked about the hourly wage rate plus the hourly fringe. So fringe includes health insurance premiums, retirement contributions, life insurance, and I'm not going to read all of them here, but it gives you a sense of what is included in that and what it does not include here. So again, I know I'm kind of repeating myself here, but really want to hit home that, as we're going through and as you're going through and managing your construction projects, ensuring that the basic hourly rate wage plus the basic hourly fringe rate is being paid to your workers, laborers, and mechanics. Nate, next slide, please. Oh. So here I just want to outline, this is a screenshot of sam.gov. In many cases, what's going to happen, and probably the expectation, is that a contract will be put out to bid, right? And that's where you, as the contractor, or if it's a developer going, looking towards receiving financial assistance, you're going to receive the wage determinations related to your specific project within those contract decisions. So as the contractor is being procured for a certain project based on a certain set of plans, you're going to know what wage determination you fall under. And so here on sam.gov, you can go out there at your own leisure and actually see to get a feel for what those wage determinations look like. Nate, next slide, please. So if you go to sam.gov, you click that hyperlink that I showed on the last slide here, and if it will bring you to this page. And this is where the Davis-Bacon wage rates are listed. So by clicking on this one, it will take you to the appropriate page. Next slide, Nate. Here's the page it's going to take you to. This is where you can find the information related to the wage rate. Like I said before, more often than not, your applicable wage rate will be included in whatever procurement format or documents that go out, and that is what you're going to base your bid on. So in many circumstances, the contracting agency, contracting entity who's going to be contracted with you is going to be issuing those. This is how they go and find those. So as you can see here, I used City of Atlanta as a example here. So you can see the state of Georgia, Fulton County, and within those, it has the various wage rates. So you can see the one that we selected here was for building to address, a lot of different construction types. One thing I do want to point out here is there has been a modification for this one. So as you can see on the screen, there's a modification number 2. So the Department of Labor is constantly getting in surveys, they're getting in updated data and information, and they could be issuing modifications to wage rates. One thing I do want to note here, though, is even though there may be constant modifications for wage rates, we'll get into it a little bit later, what happens in the process is when the contracting agency or entity is going out for bid and entering into contracts with their contractor to perform the work, they're going to do what is called locking in the wage decision. So once the wage decision is locked in, that's going to be the wage decision for the life of the project. So you're not going to have to worry about having to go back out and look to see, oh, was there a new modification, or have the numbers changed, and maybe your original bid didn't pencil out anymore. So those types of things, you're not going to have to worry about. It is locked in before construction starts. Next page, please. Here's what that, so if you clicked on the building determination, this is what that information is going to be provided to you. As I said before, this one is working off a second modification. You can see sometimes how often that they update these wage determinations. Here I have an example of an asbestos worker, an insulator. So here the applicable wage rate is $32.25. plus $18.51 for fringe, giving you a total of $50.40 per hour that is going to need to be paid to that worker. Now, the fringe could be paid in either a cash format, or it is the sum total of the benefits that are being provided as we listed earlier. So insurance, health benefits, things of that nature that add up to that $18.51. But they have to be paid the hourly wage rate. In addition, either be provided the benefit through the fringe or be provided the cash value through the fringe. Next slide. Here are some examples of various types of wage determinations. On this slide, one of the things we really want to point out, and we'll get into later within the slide deck here, of just certain things, common errors and mistakes that contractors need to watch out for, as they're going about their construction project. And that is the proper classification of employees and workers and the job that they are performing. As you can see here, there's a wage rate for a plumber, and there's a wage rate for a laborer pipe layer specific. So oftentimes one of the mistakes is a worker is improperly classed as a laborer when he really should be classed as a plumber. And as you can see, there's a very significant wage gap here in terms of what role that and functionality that worker, laborer, or mechanic is performing. So making sure that workers and the job that they are doing for the hours they are doing are being properly classed is something that you as the contractor need to be very careful and cognizant about on your projects. Next slide, please, Nate. So touched on this a little bit already. The wage decisions are the various worker classifications. On that previous slide, you can see the various descriptions and classifications that could be out there. There may be a classification that you need that you don't see there. And we'll get into that in a little bit about wage conformance and how to go about that process. Additionally, the fringe, I talked about it before. What that includes is listed here, what it doesn't include, and also the best practices, right? And these are going to be a combination of the contracting entity and you, the contractor. So the wage lock-in date, I touched on that, about having those wage rates locked in at a certain time during the bid process. The proper worker classification, right? I touched on the laborers versus the more specialized trades and making sure that you are accurately and properly classifying your workers there. Another best practice is making sure that you properly post the Davis-Bacon related acts posters and wage determinations at the job site. And also, if you have any apprentices on program or on the job site working or under contract, that you are appropriately classifying those folks to the appropriate training program. Just saying, oh yeah, we're taking Joe under our wing to kind of teach him, on the job training does not count as a bona fide training program. These are very, there are certain standards that these programs have to meet, excuse me. And, that is where it's tied to the fringe there of contributions to bona fide training funds and programs. Next slide, Nate. So you as the contractor, what is your role and responsibility? And in the next coming slides, we're going to go ahead and get into that. So, as contractors, it really starts out at the bid solicitation. So, during the bid solicitation from the contracting entity, they're going to request certain contracted work and services to be done. So you as the contractor, as you go through the bid documents, need to identify if there's any inconsistencies within the bid and identify the need for any wage conformances. So your bid document should include the applicable wage decision at that time for the project. Go through that, ensure that the proper worker classifications are all there. It does vary geography to geography. And as the Department of Labor will note, there is not a standardized job classification across geographies. So you may see a certain group of classifications in one locale versus another. One geography may have more classifications. They may have 20 different classifications. Another geography may only have 15. So take a look at those wage determinations for that project within the bid documents to see if there's any need for additional worker classifications. And we'll get into how that process works. Subcontracting, your subcontractor. Oh, yep, thank you, Nate. Subcontracting. So for your subcontractors, you need to also make sure that they are not debarred or prohibited from working on federal programs or projects. And also need to include the Davis-Bacon related acts terms and conditions flow down into all your subcontracts. So like I mentioned before, the EPA is making that flow down to IPC. IPC is making that flow down to its stakeholders. Its stakeholders and project owners are going to make that flow down towards its contractors. And again, it's the same website that we already demonstrated for the wage determination, sam.gov. That's where you can also go and check to see if your subcontractors have any potential debarment issues. As the contractor and as the prime contractor and even the subs for your particular trade or work, need to make sure that your workers, laborers, and mechanics are properly being paid their hourly wage rate and fringe in the locked-in wage decision. And also the submittal of certified weekly payrolls is going to be an ongoing activity. Ongoing compliance at the contractor level is going to be the storing and retention of payroll submissions. We'll get into it in a couple slides later, but you'll need to keep those for that 3-year retention period. And that's going to be a responsibility of the prime contractor to make sure it gets all that information from its subs. Additionally, posting signage at the work site. I'm going to have an example in a later slide here that demonstrates what that looks like. Next slide, Nate. So we already kind of went over the wage decision. This is just more information contained with that. So it's just a listing of different work classifications and the minimum wage rates. You're going to want to ensure that the proper classifications are included within that, so you know what you need to pay. And again, this just reiterates, some wage decisions cover various counties, various jurisdictions. It just really depends. So be very purposeful as you read through those, and your contracting entity and agency is going to do the same. So really, it's a lot of communication and a lot of due diligence to make sure you're taking a look at those. And the prime contractor being responsible for posting a copy of the wage decision on site at the project in a very easy and accessible place. Again, that goes communication down to the workers, laborers, and mechanics performing the work on the project. Next slide, please. Here's the poster that I've alluded to in a couple of slides now. Here's a screenshot example. If you need a copy of that, you can go to the Department of Labor website. It's form WH1321 and needs to be clearly posted along with the proper wage determination related to your project. Next slide, please. This is an example of what the weekly certified payroll form looks like. This is the form issued by the Department of Labor. This is, again, this is the paper version of it. There's various software entities out there who work with contractors and subcontractors to do this and process it electronically. Makes it a lot easier. So, it's something that IPC is currently working on how to potentially intake some of those electronic formats. However, we don't want to, at this time, make any special recommendations to contractors in terms of, what third-party software companies are out there on the market to do some of this. But I think a quick Google search can lead you in the right direction. But this is the minimum information that needs to be provided on the certified payroll form. And it's required, again, to be submitted on a weekly basis. Next page, please. So this is a brief summary of a lot of the information that needs to be included on that certified payroll. The project and contractor or subcontractor information, the employee information with the identifying number, individually identifying number. You're not to put their social security numbers on the form. It needs to be a randomized or some form of identifying number for that particular employee. Within your own personal payroll records, you obviously need to keep information related to that employee's name, that identifier, and that is where you would keep their social security type information within your own personal private payroll records. Additionally, the classification of the worker, whether or not that worker is an apprentice or trainee, and whether or not there's various classifications performed by that worker, laborer, mechanic. There could be situations in which Jeffrey McGone performs one type of work that's listed under one wage rate, and I perform another type of work that's listed under another wage rate. So again, just because I may be in one functional trade, it really depends on the type of work that I am performing. So be very diligent about taking a look at that, and sometimes a split classification is necessary. Additionally, demonstrating the regular and overtime hours. This is going to lead back to the Contract Work Hours Safety Act, and also the rate of pay needs to be listed. So the wage rate plus the fringe rate and how that all ties out. Next page, please. So submitting and retaining certified payrolls. This is something that we need to demonstrate compliance. And the purpose of this training here is really to demystify the process. Davis-Bacon has been around, like I mentioned in the earlier slide, I think it was since 1931. So it has been around for quite a while. It is applicable to pretty much all federal contracting and construction type projects in one way or another. So this is one of those compliance requirements that is more, I would say more built out, more designed, more sophisticated than some of the newer compliance requirements where there's a bit of a scrambling on how to figure out just exactly to what extent you need to comply or what that compliance needs to look like. So in this case, the primes should be reviewing their subcontractor payrolls, reviewing their own payrolls, and submitting those certified payrolls to their contracting agency. It's really important to note that you be diligent about this. There are certain requirements should there be errors on certified payrolls. I get it, everybody makes mistakes. There probably will be mistakes, and we'll need to go back and have certified payrolls corrected. But doing that due diligence on the front end, making sure that you are closely reviewing not only your subcontractor certified payrolls, but your own certified payrolls is going to make life a lot easier for you. There's going to be a lot less backtracking, trying to track down, oh, there was a underpayment somewhere, and we need to make that restitution to that labor worker mechanic. Additionally, there's the 3-year retention period after completion of the project. With these federal funds, there are a lot of stringent record-keeping requirements. IPC, subrecipients, various entities and stakeholders within this entire ecosystem are going to be subject to various monitoring activities, whether it's EPA performing that down to the awardees, or the awardees like IPC performing that due diligence with their project owners and contractors. So just want to flag the retention of information here. Next slide, please. I touched on it earlier, the additional work classification. As I mentioned, there may not be a clear-cut wage rate or classification depending on the project and type of work being done that easily fits within the wages that are listed on the Department of Labor's website, or excuse me, SAM.gov through the Department of Labor. And in those cases, that's where a wage conformance comes in. So work that is going to be performed by a classification that's not already on the applicable wage decision. And it should bear some similar relationship to some of the rates already in there. But it may be more specialized, it may be more targeted, things of that nature. So again, the way the wage rates themselves are received is through surveys from different geographical locations. And if a certain geographic location doesn't have either a trade union there or some sort of trade association to kind of respond, some of those may be missed. And that's why you see some classifications and not others in certain areas. Next slide, please. So this is where the wage conformance comes in and getting that additional work classification. In this case, the prime contractor will need to get the requested work classification. Now, in many cases, this is going to be after the fact. If you are working on the project and you find a need. Oftentimes beforehand, if the contracting entity is aware, and that's where that communication during the bid process comes in for you, the contractor, and the contracting entity to identify on the front end, hey, do we need a new wage determination? If so, your contracting entity will usually get ahead of the game on there and speak with the Department of Labor. If after the fact, and you're already under contract and you identify the need for a additional wage rate, that's when you're going to have to go through this process listed here, requesting authorization from the Department of Labor for that new or revised wage decision. Next slide, please. Here we get into common errors. So I want to go over this, and then we're close to being done, so we'll open it up to Q&A here. But you know, some of the common errors that we see and that you as contractors need to be you know, on the watch for is, you know, sometimes there's inadequate payroll information. So the payroll information does not match up to the information put on the certified payroll. That's going to be identified through various monitoring activities that may happen. There may be on-site monitoring activities, there may be desk monitoring activities, there may be sampling activities. So those types of activities in order to fulfill the due diligence requirements for oversight and monitoring. Missing identification numbers, if it's not easily, if you can't track the workers back to the payroll records and can't track the workers throughout the certified payroll, that's going to create potential issues. Incomplete payrolls, so with this one, the incomplete payrolls, it may be your own documentation system. So you want to make sure that you have within your own payroll system, the employee wage and deduction information that through a monitoring activity can be tied back to the certified payrolls. Additionally, classifications, making sure that your workers are classified with the proper wage decision type for the work that they perform. And again, that's where split classifications, you know, might create some issues if they aren't sufficiently detailed. Additionally, the wage rates, your wage rates, I know it sounds simple, but you need to make sure the wage rates in the decision match up with the wage rates listed on your certified payrolls. So, you know, for any piecework employees that the effective hourly rate is computed. Next slide, please. Apprentices and trainees. This is one we see very often and why I kind of keep coming back to this. Oftentimes we'll have contractors say, oh yeah, you know, we had this guy on a, you know, took him under our wing. And I'm kind of using the same scenario again, but it's something we see very, very often. It needs to be a certified training or apprentice program if they're going to be classified as apprentices or trainees. So that's a very stringent requirement that very often is missed by contractors when performing their certified payrolls. Overtime, you know, accurately calculating the hours that the employee works at the job sites, and you know, other jobs as well. So it may be a little bit tricky there, but making sure that overtime is calculated properly. Computation of deductions, right? So you know, very simple arithmetic. And this is where, you know, very often those electronic certified payroll software companies, you know, really shine. Because if you're doing it by paper, we're all human, we all make mistakes. And sometimes, you know, there could be a simple arithmetic mistake that requires a revisement. And then I hope this doesn't happen, but, you know, we do sometimes get and this is why we have to monitor and sample these, falsification by contractors. So falsification of payroll information, falsification of certifications, that's going to lead to very serious questions being asked and potential penalties, debarments, things of that nature. Next slide, please, Nate. So here I have listed the corrections, restitutions, and sanctions. So how I'd like to go into this subject here is, we're all in this together. We're all here to help support compliance. IPC, putting on this training and putting on other trainings is really trying to raise the level of awareness and knowledge of everyone working in this ecosystem as to what the compliance requirements are. But that being said, there could be situations where mistakes happen, where certified payrolls need to be corrected, certified payrolls need to be updated. Workers, laborers, and mechanics have to receive restitution for wages that they weren't paid. As I hope this doesn't happen, but from my own personal experience working in county government, one time I had to hold on to about $1.75 for somebody because they weren't paid correctly. So again, that's why the arithmetic and calculating the proper pay amounts is required. If you could go to the next slide, Nate, because there could be withholding from contracts. You could be required to put those funds, that $1.75 I talked about, into an escrow account while you try to track down John Doe to make sure that he's paid his appropriate wages. So there are concerns, there are restitutions. In many cases, there are simple fixes to this. You make the proper payment, you document it, you go about your lives. If the project closes out and there's issues that are found, this is where it gets put into escrow. Finally, we talked about 2 slides ago, the falsification. And I hope we don't run into any of that, but it does happen, unfortunately. And in these cases where there is that willful, kind of disregard, you could face administrative sanctions. You could be debarred. The agency could, and the agency and Office of Inspector General could, perform investigations, limited participation on government-funded contracts. So, for these more egregious issues, there are various types of administrative sanctions that are possible. All that being said, in many cases, there are simple corrections and restitutions that can happen to tidy these things up, take care of it, and make sure we're all in compliance. Next slide, please, Nate. And that does it for my presentation. Now I think we're going to go ahead and open it up to Q&A. But before that, I'll turn it over to Nate.
Yeah, thanks so much, Jeffrey. That was really, really, really a lot of information, really helpful. Before we start taking questions, I want to see, John, if you have any insights that you want to share, about what this looks like in practice from your experience.
Sure. So I think at a high level, before we open up the questions, was Jeffrey, thank you. This was an excellent presentation. And I just want to remind the audience that Davis-Bacon requirements are almost 100 years old. So people have been complying with Davis-Bacon since the 1930s. I personally have been doing it for about 15 years on dozens of solar projects. And the one thing that's changed from when I first started to now is that there's lots of software and training to help with it and make it better. And so, with that, I would hand it back to you, Nate, to facilitate the rest of the discussion. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, John. Yeah, and also, Robin, wanted to open it up to you too, to see if you had anything you wanted to add on to Jeffrey's presentation.
Thanks for that, Nate. Now, Jeffrey, as always, did a phenomenal job, very thorough in laying out a great overview of what Davis-Bacon and related acts will require, particularly when projects are actually getting started, and how to, the details that you need to pay attention to in order to start right and stay right. And I think that's always the goal from a compliance standpoint. I do want to introduce Talisa Benjamin, who's on the call as well from our team. She has deep expertise as well in Davis-Bacon and related acts and compliance. And so we're here to answer any additional questions that aren't covered by the slides to the extent that we can. As y'all know, our team motto is, if we know, we will share it. If we don't, we will take it down, research it, and get back with you as soon as we can. So we're here to answer any questions that we can.
Excellent. Great. Well, I do want to encourage folks to type in questions into the Q&A console. We have a question in the console that's not Davis-Bacon related, but I think I can provide an answer about RFPs for solar panel installation companies. I will just say that we have a solicitations page on IPC's website with a couple of open solicitations currently. We also have opened our financial assistance products for community solar. We've got 2 products now. We hope to release additional financing products soon, and very possible that some of those companies or developers coming through that pipeline may be contracting with panel installers, EPCs, other or other entities. So I think that answers that question. Are there other questions folks have? Quiet in the Q&A console. Okay, there's a question about information on prevailing wage for solar work, specifically in LA.
John or Robin, or would you like to take first crack at it? I know people might be tired of hearing from me a little bit today. Otherwise, I can take it as well.
So maybe I would focus on a pitfall. I'll leave the Davis-Bacon discussion to Robin and Jeffrey, but we do a lot of work in California, and it's important to note that California has its own prevailing wage and apprenticeship for solar as well, which may or may not be the same as Davis-Bacon. So as you think about doing solar projects in California, you need to double your effort and make sure that if you are subject to Davis-Bacon prevailing wage, you are complying with it, but that you are also complying with California prevailing wage and apprenticeship. And I think I can put a website in the chat while Jeffrey, Talisa, and Robin are talking more about LA.
Yeah, so one of the things I would mention there is you can I would recommend going out to the sam.gov site, as we mentioned in the slides. Like Nate said before, we're going to hand those slides out so you can kind of go through and walk through this process yourself. So within that, it will have the Davis-Bacon wage info in California. I would imagine the California Department of Labor has its own information out there regarding its state prevailing wage laws and requirements. So that's a resource as well. We tried to make this training more state agnostic, as this is a nationwide program. So each state is going to have its own particular requirements there, and that those will be contained within your contracting documents, right? Because you are going to be those contracts are going to be subject to both federal and state law. So that will be included. But I would recommend, if you're concerned about Davis-Bacon wage rates in California, going to sam.gov, and you can look up the wage rates for LA there. Robin, Talisia, did I mention anything? Sorry about that.
No, you're fine, Jeffrey. I think you and John covered everything for that question. I think it's so important, again, to understand the federal requirements, but also to overlay those with the state requirements. And because those vary, I love how you put that this training was state agnostic, because what's acceptable in Texas is different than California, is different in Illinois, et cetera. So it's really incumbent upon you to become familiar with your state departments of labor and how that interfaces with the federal guidelines.
Great, thanks for that. Next question, can you give us any insight into Davis-Bacon compliance management by orgs that are acting as lenders to a non-residential project? I don't know who wants to take a first crack there.
So I can go ahead and take a first stab at this one. So I guess my follow-up question, not to answer a question with a question, but by non-residential project, is it meant, is it a construction project or a non-construction project, right? Whether or not it's residential or not. So I'll give two answers. So if it's, compliance management by organizations acting as lenders to, let's say, a non-residential construction project, so a building project, that is where the building wage decision would apply. So think of buildings storing utilities or housing utilities, buildings for supplies, various building structures, et cetera, whatever you want to call it. That's where that building wage determination would be. Now, to answer the other potential question of if it is a non-construction type project that's being funded, Davis-Bacon would not apply to that. So if a lender is funding a non-construction project, in many cases, you would have to look at everything that it is funding. So I would, analyze the project as a whole, but could be cases where the project has been completed and maybe there's takeout financing for a completed project after the fact. Timing is going to be key on this. That's going to be less for the contractors to worry about and more of the contracting entities, the subrecipients, the developers, well, maybe not the developers so much, but more of those subrecipients who are providing financing for that. So I hope that answers your question there.
Yeah, I think so. Anything else to add, Felisa, Robin, John? Great. Okay. Next question, for retaining the payroll documents, do we have to retain hard copy documents if they're produced by hand, or can we scan them and retain them digitally?
So they can be kept digitally. Digital signatures are okay. You need the original digital signature. You can't make photocopies of the digital signature, but there is a path for digital copies to be kept.
Great. There's a question about ground-mounted community solar and what the construction type would be if it serves residential customers.
So it's less, I don't want to monopolize the time or the responses.
Go ahead, yeah.
Yeah, so it's less on who it serves and more of the construction type of what's being constructed here, right? So if it's ground-mounted community solar, if it's not, on a let's just say single-family home, it probably would not be residential. If it's its own, site on land, it would most likely fall under the building wage decision type. But it really just depends on a project by project basis. And I would say the contracting entity is the one to make that determination and should be informing the bidding contractors as to which wage decision applies.
Great. Anything else to add from our panelists? Okay. A question that maybe I'll just preface by saying that IPC's and our coalition's program serves community solar and multifamily solar project types and various cousins and variants thereof. But theirs is a question about when you expect Davis-Bacon to apply with Solar for All funding to put on a private residence. Do you expect it to apply? Assume would it apply mostly when dealing with government-owned buildings?
Okay. Let's see, on a private rent. I'm a little confused on whether it's a private residence or a government-owned type
I think the
residence.
question is about private residence. And again, just to
Okay.
be clear, our program is generally serving community solar and multifamily. Robin, I saw you come off mute there. Do you want to answer that one?
Well, and I think from our previous conversations about this, what we have learned is this. If the homeowner themselves is hiring the contractor, then Davis-Bacon would not apply. However, if that's not the scenario, then you should be very careful and make sure that you are applying the appropriate prevailing wage rates. And I'm going to stop there and let Jeffrey add any additional commentary to Lisa, John as well. But I think generally speaking, that's what we're learning, and that's how we're seeing this as apply.
Yeah, that's what we're seeing as well. So I would just echo that. One thing that I would bring up is if you as a contractor are used to working in HUD funded programs, Department of Housing and Urban Development funded programs, which could be community development block grants, various other types of housing dollars, Davis-Bacon is applied differently than it is for EPA. So one thing to be aware of is if you're like, oh, I know Davis-Bacon like the back of my hand, but you're doing it on HUD funded projects, there's actually statutory waivers for, I think it's 7 or more, 6 or less, something like that, that Davis-Bacon doesn't apply, essentially single family homes. That is not the case under the EPA Solar for All program. As Robin mentioned here, it's a little bit more nuanced. So just something to keep in mind.
Great. Maybe potentially our final question, and it's actually more of a comment, but wanted to see if you have a clarification, Jeffrey. So the question is about piecework employees. Someone says that they've been involved with Davis-Bacon for a long time and haven't heard of contracting away the base wage through an alternative methodology such as piecework.
That one I'll probably have to do a little bit more research on, just to give a good answer, I think, for how that needs to be applied specifically. I don't want to make a sweeping gesture on that particular one.
Great, and we are getting close to the top of the hour here. I want to be sure that we thank Jeffrey and John and Robin and Talisa, our panelists from Cohn-Resnick, Sunwealth, and Impact Consulting. A lot of information provided. Again, I want to also mention that we will be providing a link to this, a recording of this on our website. We also, I want to say this is part of a series that we're doing. And so we will have a follow-on webinar on July 10th focused on Build America, Buy America, BABA, and compliance related to BABA. So that's in the queue. I know there are a lot of questions that we didn't get to. Thanks for your engagement, to our audience for your engagement in this webinar. We will do our best to answer those questions and post them to our FAQ page. Anything else from our panelists before we sign off here?
I think as a best practice, you want to treat prevailing wage like you treat OSHA if you're a developer or an EPC. So make sure you have appropriate training throughout your organization and make sure your construction supervisor is really well trained on it.
Yeah, I would just really echo what John mentioned there. That's all really, really good information. Compliance is something that we're all accountable for, all parties. So working together, as the contractor with your contracting entity and just within this ecosystem, I think we'll all be successful. And my sincere hope is that this, if you weren't as familiar with Davis-Bacon, now it's become you're a little bit more familiar with it. It's a little demystified, and to help you be successful in your projects. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. The only thing that I would add as we close out is to, have those pre-construction meetings, have your kickoff meetings, communicate with your subcontractors who are going to be responsible for this information, and make sure that they understand your expectations and what's required as a part of this these funding streams. And also use an electronic payroll system. Those would be my only two advices. Use an whichever one you choose, but use something electronic to help you.
That's great advice and great information all the way around. Thanks again to our panelists and to our audience for tuning in and participating. And hopefully we'll see you at the next webinar. Have a great day.
Thanks, IPC.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.